What's happening, my friends? Welcome back. Let's quickly go over Dan Hooker versus Arman Tsarukyan. Looks like that one's going down. Let's get right into it. All right, so first let's go over these guys' attributes. Dan Hooker, primarily a striker. However, he has been improving his ground game, his grappling in general. We've seen Dan Hooker go for submission attempts, actually land submissions. And at this point, I would not say that he's a noob on the ground at all. Is he on the level of Arman Tsarukyan? Hell no. However, once again, Dan is fairly competent on the ground. His forte is his striking. He's aggressive, puts pressure on guys, comes forward, loves to get into a slugfest. And that is where I believe Dan Hooker is the most dangerous in a firefight, in a slugfest. Dan Hooker also has to be one of the most mentally tough individuals we've ever seen in the sport. Moving on quickly to Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan is one of the best grapplers in the sport. As a matter of fact, I think one of the best we've ever seen in mixed martial arts. I'm not talking about outside accolades. I'm talking about wrestling and grappling application to the sport of mixed martial arts. Arman Tsarukyan is a problem in the grappling department. Same way Khamzat's a problem. Same way Khabib was a problem. The thing is with Arman Tsarukyan, he's also ever improving, specifically in his striking. He can knock you out on the feet, certainly has power, and he seems to look better and better in the striking area with every fight. Certainly doesn't look uncomfortable. So I would say Arman Tsarukyan is well-rounded, and being well-rounded makes you dangerous and takes you far in the sport. Arman Tsarukyan is aggressive, pushes the pace himself, in my opinion, tries to go for the finish. May not always work out that way, but I think he's an exciting fighter in his own right. Some people have questioned Arman Tsarukyan's toughness due to fight pullouts. I'm not sure how many times that's happened, but I think this notion that Arman Tsarukyan's not tough is kind of crazy. I think he's a dog in his own respect, and he's a hell of an athlete. All right, so how could this fight possibly play out? Striking, I'm going to give the edge in striking to Dan Hooker, even though I do think Arman Tsarukyan could stop Hooker if he lands clean. But as far as being a polished, comfortable striker, got to give it to Dan Hooker. I think he's more fluid, he's more comfortable, and that's more his forte than Arman Tsarukyan. Grappling, no question, Arman Tsarukyan. As a matter of fact, I think Arman has a greater advantage in the grappling than Hooker has in the striking. That's why I think I have to lean towards Arman Tsarukyan in this fight, probably 60-40. I think if Arman fights smart, doesn't just try to stand with Dan Hooker to prove a point, if he initiates takedowns, implements his wrestling and grappling, I think he has this fight. Because I don't think that Dan Hooker could hang with Arman Tsarukyan for a lengthy amount of time on the ground. I think eventually Arman would continue to gain dominant position, land ground and pound, hunt for that submission, and eventually get it by wearing Dan out. It's imperative Dan Hooker keeps this fight standing, where he has his best shot to win, especially if he makes Arman Tsarukyan get into a wild, crazy brawl and firefight. That's what he needs to do. Make it ugly, bait him in, and if Arman's not willing to engage in that, Hooker has to control the distance, use his jab, use long-range attacks, teep kicks, low kicks sparingly, be careful with the takedowns. Can't let Arman get him against the cage, corner him, because if Dan Hooker's back gets against the cage, Arman's going to work that takedown and eventually get it. So keep it in the middle, Dan. Arman Tsarukyan, get your respect on the feet, show that you're competent, show that you're capable, engage Dan on the feet, but don't overdo it. He has to go for takedowns, has to time them properly, don't force them. And if he mixes it up, utilizes his strength, which is the wrestling and grappling, I think Arman Tsarukyan could win a dominant decision or even get a finish. One more thing, cardio and conditioning. I think Dan has some pretty good cardio and conditioning, considering the pace he fights at, but I will give the edge there to Arman Tsarukyan, and that's going to help him out if he makes Dan work a lot, defend those takedowns a lot, and makes Dan wrestle and grapple. That will fatigue Dan Hooker and make the fight more winnable for Arman Tsarukyan. So final pick, I'm going to go Arman Tsarukyan 60-40. I think the wrestling and grappling is going to get him the win. Dan historically has looked like he's had issues with that. I think there's a big gap there, and I think Tsarukyan is going to exploit it. So final pick, Arman Tsarukyan. Guys, let me know in the comment section who takes this fight. Who do you have winning? Appreciate you watching the video or listening. If you enjoy the content, first time at the channel, hit that like button, subscribe. Helps the channel grow. Appreciate it. Catch you guys on the next one. Until then, stay safe, stay blessed, my friends. Later.